So that kind of fits all that together. Now, one thing you want to do before you start gluing, we're pretty much ready to glue up this piece. Before you start gluing, make sure you come along your end line here and line up all these plates. You want them to just kind of be centered on each other. You don't want them kicked off like that, because when you glue it, it'll start locking things into place. So just come along and kind of line those up on an end view until they look what you look with, you know, they look how you like. They're not super critical, but the better alignment, you know, obviously. Okay. Everything's lined up pretty good. I'm just going to kind of lightly hold it together, and then we're just going to start gluing it. So you glue this just like you would glue the fingers. Again, trying to avoid gluing your own fingers, but I like to start by just kind of laying in some glue along this base plate right here along the backs. We're just trying to lock that guy down. Kind of give it a press, make sure everything starts to hold as it glues in there. I'll keep coming back. You notice I'll keep coming back and checking that alignment. I also like to glue in these little guys because it kind of boxes out this bottom section and makes it hold together well. So making sure that those two tabs are set, I'm just going to put a little glue right along these three tabs here. Start locking in that. And if you get a run of glue, I tend to just take the tip of my my glue bottle here and just kind of spread it so it smooths out, so you don't end up with a little lump of glue. It doesn't really hurt anything. Glue on the plywood actually helps because it starts to stiffen up the plywood. So the front is kind of glued. I'll come back here and make sure that this stuff is all squeezed together nicely. And then I'll do the same. I'll just start laying some glue on the tabs. Now this one will take a bit. There's a lot of little tabs to glue, and you want it to be fairly strong. You don't want to skimp here because this is, you know, your entire hand is hanging off of this one part. So you want it to be fairly strong. Give it a second to kind of glue before I move on. Now luckily, you know, if you're using the cyanoacrylate, it sets up pretty quickly. If you're doing this with Elmer's white glue, you're definitely going to want to take your time, maybe put some clamps on certain areas while they set. So now I'm going to come along here and I'll do the back side of these tabs. This one looks to be out a little. I wasn't quite sitting in all the way. I'll just come along and run some glue over these 4 tabs, starting to lock it together. Oops, stuck my fingers to it. Oh, did it again. See? Just setting this up. Okay. Got these. Before I start gluing this or the end here, again, I'll come back and do one more check. And I'll come along and just glue up those. And then when it comes to these seams, you just want to take your super glue and you're just going to run a bead. You can run it right down this seam. Just attaching all these little pieces together. And on those back seams, I like to sometimes I will glue them and then let it sit for a few minutes and let that glue set up, and then I'll come back and run them again, because they can have a little bit of a gap in there, and that first coat of super glue kind of fills the gap, and then the second coat goes in and really bonds it up. So again, you know, you can spend a little bit of time working all the different positions on this, you know, putting glue in the cracks, just really trying to get all your pieces glued together, because again, this is your main support structure for the whole hand. So we want it to be strong. Now you may notice you'll get a little bit of glue on the surface of the plywood, and it'll start changing things. One thing I like to do is once I get this hand glued up, this is coming along pretty good, it's still a little wet, but take your time on putting this together. I'm not going to spend a ton of time because I want to move on, but do take your time, get it glued up well. And then what you can do is after you've got it glued up, you can actually come back with your sanding pad and work each one of these plates and kind of take off a little of the glue. It helps smooth the transition between the plates, can make it look really nice. Now don't get carried away, you don't want to take off too much material, but just a quick sanding kind of helps clean them up. Again, just kind of letting it dry. Pretty strong. If you were going to go back and put a second coat on everything, I definitely would recommend it. Okay. Alright. And basically that is how you assemble. Now there are two more little pieces. I got to put these guys on, almost forgot them there. Okay, so what these pieces are is these are the pivots that this wishbone is going to hang on right here. And so you just want to take them. These are about the only thing on the hand that is side determinant, meaning clean side versus not clean side, because all these other parts will only go together one way because the orientation, you can't flip them to make the clean side. So these guys can. So again, I tend to look at them, see which side has the cleaner hole, and put that side to the out. So these tabs actually go on here in reverse with this little lug facing in towards the palm. So we take our two tabs, put them on here. Now what I like to do is just look at these from the side, and you want them to be kind of square. What you don't want is you don't want these tabs leaning left or right, because the spacing between the tabs needs to be correct for the thumb piece to fit on. So once I got them in place, then I'll just run some glue in here. And I'm doing it from the bottom side here because it's easier to glue them, and then once they're in place I'll flip it over and put a little from the top side. Again, always looking at them from the end, just making sure we got them in there fairly square. There's a little bit of play, so it's not super critical. Alright. And now they're in place, so I'll put a little glue from the back side. Again, these two little tabs are what carry the thumb, so you want them to be pretty strong. You'll notice I do that sometimes. I've already got super glue on my fingers, so it's just a way to kind of smooth out everything. I don't necessarily recommend it, but okay. So that puts those two tabs on that will carry the thumb. Okay, so we're going to set that aside here to dry, and we're going to look at the thumb